Okay, we're now live.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the decision days of myself. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the Executive Lead Member for Universal Services, as well as my colleague Russell Oppenheimer, who is the Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. These decision days are being broadcast in one session live on YouTube via the County Council's website. And I'd like to welcome as well Councillor Tim Groves, who's the opposition spokesperson, and also from the independent group, Councillor Sarah Pankhurst. And I don't think, I've got Councillor Jackie Branson, who's the Vice Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And is that all the councillors we've got? I'm trying to look at the list of people who are here.
I think it is at the moment.
That's all of us at the minute. Oh, and Prad Baines, sorry, Prad, you're online as well. So
no worries.
Well, welcome to everybody. I was just looking to see whether Kim Taylor was joining, because she's the Labour spokesperson, but I know that she's doing an operation. So if you're watching, Kim, I hope you're feeling better soon. And she sent apologies. I should have said that. So there are no deputations for decision day today. So without further ado, let's get on to the first item. So the first one is a project appraisal update. It's the Transforming Cities Fund for the Southampton part of that fund, and it's about the Rushington Roundabout bus scheme. It's on pages 5 to 14 of our agenda. Patrick, I think you're going to introduce it.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Adams-King. I mean, you've given the title there. This is really part of tranche 2 of the Transforming Cities Fund. And just the couple of points I'd pick out on this is, one, part of it's about an increase in the value of the scheme, which is a bit of a theme that we've seen across a number of reports over the last few months, really. But there's an element of this one where there's a slight increase in the scope as well, which we've had to do for reasons set out in the report. But I wasn't prepared to say or plan to say much more than that, really. The report as it stands. Thank you.
Super. Any comments from anybody? Yes, Tim.
Yes, just to say, I believe this scheme, yes, has taken into account the local members' concerns, and I think we're supportive of what is proposed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, super. Thanks. And Sarah, Russell, would you like to add anything? Sarah.
Yeah, we discussed this actually the other day. Concerns about the increased costs as regards to the overall HCC budget, but obviously these we have to acknowledge the effects of inflation as well. So we are supportive.
Super, thanks. And Russell?
No, nothing to add. Very supportive.
No, okay. Super, thanks very much. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 5 of our agenda. I think the only comment I would make, exactly as Sarah said, unfortunately the impact of inflation has played quite a part in this one, as it has with a couple of our items today. Inflation in the construction sector has been running far ahead, actually, of where it is in the general economy. And consequently, we're having to readjust our budgets, but this is a good scheme. I know Councillor Harrison, whose division this is supportive of it. And so I'm very happy to confirm the recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 5 and approve the scheme. So the next one is another Transforming Cities Fund, this time on the other side of Southampton over at Bursleden. It's the A27 Providence Hill, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Adams-King. Again, a much needed scheme for this particular area. Transforming Cities Fund Tranche 2, as we've said before. Again, a similar theme to last time in terms of looking at the budget for it and the cost for that. And again, linked to some of the inflationary pressures we're seeing at the moment. One point I would make with this one, and in fact also applies to the last one, was the one thing that we test very carefully when we see an increase in budget is that test of value for money. Does it still represent value for money for the sum that we're looking at for each scheme? So again, it's been tested quite carefully with this one as well. But that was all I was planning to say for it. Thank you.
Thanks. Again, any Tim?
Yes, thank you very much for this. Yes, again, I think the local member is supportive of particularly the crossing points part of the scheme. I think he's concerned that the cycleway parts of the scheme won't be used and is possibly a waste of money because particularly because it has 2 crossing points of the road. So there's definitely a concern there as to whether it's worthwhile spending this extra money on that. Certainly we support the crossing part of the scheme. Thank you.
Okay. And before we I'll ask for a response perhaps from officers from that in a minute, but let's just, if we go to Sarah next, and then we can perhaps wrap up any comments in one go. Thank
you. Just fully supportive. I know the area very well. I'm very supportive of the crossings. If there is a redundancy in one of the crossings, I would support Councillor Groves' comment as well. Okay.
Patrick, or perhaps Ben, I don't know whether was someone like to sort of have a bit of response to Tim?
I've asked Ben to be on the call in case we had any sort of detailed technical questions. So I might just hand over to Ben to answer that question on the two crossings, if I may. Ben, please.
No problem. Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, thanks for the questions on that. I think the point about the cycle route is it is kind of a missing link at the moment between a cycle route both to the east and to the west. So I take your point entirely about the value of the crossings, which I think we're all in agreement is needed. But the cycle route section, I think in our view, is connecting up to existing sections of cycle route and is part of the kind of longer term sort of behavioural change piece about making facilities available for cyclists. And whilst there may be limited demand currently, I think the hope is that will grow. And just to be able to support that and measure that, I think there are some cameras that are being installed as part of the scheme, which will monitor and measure and capture the volumes of people that are using the scheme, which will then enable us to make informed decisions going forward about the impact it's had and the value it's had. So hopefully that gives a bit of helpful context to the scheme.
Yeah, that is helpful. And I know it quite well as well, this piece of road, and certainly the cycle part of it links up then to both the route into Southampton and then across into Fareham itself, and eventually I guess up into your division, Sarah. So hopefully if we don't provide it, I guess we're in a position where we don't know whether people will use it until we provide it, and then if we can encourage people to provide it, then the evidence that we'll gather will be able to inform how we point people at using it. So I understand the concern, but I think this is one, as Patrick has explained, it's gone through the test of resilience in terms of it being still good use of public funds, and so I think I would remain supportive of it and hope that we can encourage people to use the facilities it will provide.
So can I just challenge that very briefly, Nick? Just to whether we have the right solution for the cycle path. I mean, I do take your point. We need to connect up cycle routes either side. If there are a number of crossing points, is there any way we can avoid that or change the design so that we can reduce the crossing points and make it easier for cyclists to use? That's the question, perhaps.
Okay, Ben, is that something that is still possible to look at, or are we quite set on this design?
Well, we're quite a long way down the track in terms of terminology there in terms of the scheme, and just hoping to get the approval for the funding to confirm the award of the contract and get on site and get it built out. So we're a long way down there. If there are sort of minor modifications that we can build in without kind of disrupting the whole scheme and actually impacting on the kind of the cost and the programming and the sequencing of the works, I'm happy to do that. So I'm happy to take that kind of offline and have a look at that and then come back to you outside the meeting, Councillor Groves, if that's okay.
Yes, much appreciated. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you.
No problem.
Super. I'd imagine that this has been in the offing for quite some time. So this isn't a new thing we're bringing here. It is one that it's gone through with my predecessor in terms of getting to this point. Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, just to say, really, I do approve of the scheme, and the cameras will be useful so that we can see how it's being used. So yeah, I do support this.
Super. That's great. Thanks very much, Russell. Any?
Well, unlike you, Nick, and unlike other councillors on this call, I don't know the area very well at all. But I'm generally very much in favour of cycling schemes, and it would just be very interesting to see the uptick in cycling that we get, and the cameras should mean we can make some sort of analysis of that. If it's a 20% increase in the number of people cycling that route, that would be very, very useful evidence when it comes to doing scheme management on scheme development on other areas of Hampshire. So yeah, very supportive.
Super, thanks. Okay, any other comments, anybody? No, all good. So in which case the recommendations that we're talking about with this one are in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 15 of your agenda. It's increasing the budget for the scheme from 1.9 to just over 2.8 million. And then there are various provisions around making any changes. I welcome the conversation between Ben and Tim offline to see if there are any sort of tweaks that can be made that will help in terms of keeping our local member on happy. But otherwise, I'm very happy to approve the scheme. Thanks. So we're on to item number 3, which is the Universal Services Capital Programme 22-23 end of year and 23-24 quarter 1. It's on pages 27 to 62. It's an enormous amount of work that Maria and her team have put in to do all of this. So Patrick, would you like to introduce all these figures?
Of course, thanks, Councillor. As you say, it's the Capital Programme end of year report, 22-23. Also, it covers Q1 for 23-24 as well. And the first thing you'll see within the report, it's the first of the new format, if you like. I remember the last capital report we took was an amalgamation of the 2 previous departments. So this brings it all together. And I think, as you acknowledge, it's an enormous amount of work, which I think reflects the breadth and scale of the directorate at the moment. But what colleagues have tried to do is construct it in such a way that it's a clear read that goes through by branch and the areas by branch, so you can see how each bit sits within a branch and how it's done for clarity. The report, as well as setting out the breadth, I think helpfully sets out some of the challenges we're facing as well, and so that's covered within the report. But it stands, it speaks for itself. That was all I was really prepared to cover on that report. Thank you.
You're on mute still.
Your meat.
Rookie error, sorry. Any questions or comments, everybody?
None from me. Thank you very much.
No. Tim, Sarah? No, all good. Russell?
Oh yeah, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight when looking at the capital report, please. Firstly, when it comes to the schools rebuilding programme and schools improvement programme, I think it's just worth noting that Hampshire County Council is the largest responsible body when it comes to schools. We have the largest number of schools. And I just want to commend the team for the work they do. You know, it's really great to see that the team here in Universal Services have been working very well with the Department for Education. And we're not just working with government, they've also fed in to Parliament through the Public Accounts Committee and their scrutiny of this issue. There's been quite a lot of media coverage recently about the condition of school buildings. And I think the public will be reassured to know we are very much on the case here in Hampshire. We know exactly what we need to do, and we've got, you know, a programme of schools that are prioritised, 7 schools provisionally prioritised within the latest phase of the programme. Yeah, I think that, you know, it's a really good example of Hampshire County Council doing excellent work there on school buildings. So I'm really grateful to Mike Bridgman and his team. And then I also wanted to just flag up that this capital programme is bringing to a conclusion the Country Parks Transformation Programme. It's been a very successful programme, and as well as, you know, putting the country parks on a sustainable financial footing, we've also now got a suite of modern, excellent visitor attractions in our country parks, and benefits enjoy them enormously. I was lucky enough to visit Staunton Country Park and Staunton Farm with the leader last week, and we had an excellent visit, and we were so impressed by the facilities, the cafe, the play barn, the farm, and not just that, but just the range of community organisations that get involved in volunteering and other things. So, you know, I think the transformation programme is an example of a job well done. And so thanks to the Countryside team on that. And those are the 2 things I wanted to flag up in the capital programme.
Super, thanks, Russell. I think if you look at in the appendices to this report, in Appendix 1, you can see just the amount of money that this involved. It's 146 million, and that then is broken down into all sorts of different schemes. Not least the 17.8 million that we have managed to attract in grant funding, and all of that is improvement for our area. But this wouldn't be possible, any of this, without all of the work that Maria and her team do, which is really excellent in terms of putting it all together and giving us the overview so that we can keep track of how all this is, how the money is being spent and what's happening. There was one other thing I just wanted to mention, which is in paragraph 98 on page 42. It's just about the Market Town Fund investment. You'll notice there that some towns have spent some of the money in the indicative allocation and some haven't as yet. That's largely because, as Russell knows well, in Petersfield, we're using that money towards some road improvements on Pullens Lane and in other parts of the town, which are now finally proceeding at pace, hopefully. And one short thing is, it looks like Winchester's being shortchanged with a drop of 50,000. It's not really. It's just that money is going into a different pot to part of the Winchester movement strategy and the work that's being done there. So it's just sort of moving slightly. But otherwise, really excellent piece of work. Thank you so much for everybody who's contributed towards it. I'm very happy to approve that. And the recommendations on paragraph 3 to 7 on pages 27 to 28. Okay. If we're happy to move on to item number 4, which is bus contracts in the New Forest, Romsey and Eastleigh areas. Before we start, I just need to make a short declaration of interest. As most of you will know, I am the member for Romsey Rural, and so some of these bus services obviously affect the area that I represent. More importantly, my children use buses, as do I occasionally. I'm not aware that I use any of these buses though, but I just sort of make that as a non-prejudicial interest before we go any further. Patrick.
Thanks, Councillor King. I mean, all I was going to say with these ones really is the report set out the outcome of tender returns and analysis, and therefore what the results are and the recommendations about how we take that forward. It was good the discussion we'd had at the Select Committee this morning on buses more generally, but also specifically the next paper as well, but the buses more generally, the interest in that. And I think what we see again, not dissimilar to some of the other papers, is real pressure on the finances and the tender returns that we're seeing coming back. And I think with Lisa and the team working within that and trying to come up with the most both creative and innovative solutions for the funding that we have that meets the requirements of the residents. But Lisa's here to ask any more specific questions. But again, that was all I was going to say on that paper. Thank you.
Yes, for those of you who weren't there, we had an excellent presentation from Lisa and quite a long discussion about this as well in the Select Committee this morning. And it always astounds me that Lisa can remember all the different bus numbers of every single route in Hampshire. Did you want to add anything to that, Lisa, before we go to comments?
No, that's fine. I couldn't promise I know all of the bus numbers. I do know some.
You appear to. That's the important thing. Tim.
Yes. I mean, I'd just like to endorse that. I'm very impressed by the way you sound to know everything that's going on. So well done, Lisa, for that. Even if you don't, you sound very good. But it is actually quite brilliant, and an awful lot of work you're put in. I can see to bus work throughout the county, and I know you have a problem with the budget that we have to work to. So obviously that is what you're trying to deal with here by saying you have a reduced budget and therefore you can't deliver what you wanted before, and tenders are higher than before. I'm still concerned about the reduction in the service to Eastleigh from 2 hours to 1. Again, it doesn't sound right to me. I mentioned that this morning. I'd love it if there was a possibility of getting back the 1 hourly service. Is there any way of looking into that, for example, going forward?
I mean, the approvals we're asking for today are only for 1 year, so we will be reviewing these services after that first year. So that's something I'll make a note of, and I and the team will look into that when we see what the demand's like and where those travel patterns are in the next coming months.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Sarah, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to say thank you, Lisa, for the extensive information this morning. And obviously you understand the budgetary constraints, and it's quite surprising about the fact that the bus companies are paying quite good salaries but still having problems getting their drivers. So I do understand the difficulties, and just great you have the knowledge that, and I know who to go to now. Thank you.
Super. And Russell?
No, nothing to add from me.
No, okay. So Lisa, thank you for what is a really comprehensive report, and I absolutely recognise that unfortunately, really unfortunately, we can't always do what everybody wants. There is, as we both know well, some concern from residents in the New Forest about the removal of the Cango service and its replacement. And a couple of quick questions, I think, just in response to some of the queries we've had in the last 24 hours, that I just wanted to sort of verbalise here, so that we at least recognise that they come in and so on. The first is that there was a question around the legality of the decision that we were making around that service, and I know that there's been some debate around how we go about that, and certainly you've made a very good attempt to engage with everybody. Can you just talk us through that bit of it, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the query about the legality is surrounds the decision that's really already been made, because what this report asks is that we enact the plan that was approved by Councillor Heron back in November in the absence of an alternative option for us. We spent the last few months trying to find an alternative option, trying to explore different delivery models. And so as I understand it, the concerns about the legality of that is really about the legality of our SP23 consultation and the process that followed on thereafter. And I can confirm that the consultation was carried out in line with Hampshire's procedures and processes, and it was done with legal colleagues saw it before it went out, and the Insights and Engagements team, who work really hard on these consultations, are obviously experts in making sure that we are compliant with the relevant ways in which we need to work. And I had a great deal of support from that team in order to deliver the SP23 consultation. And so, therefore, I have no concerns over the legality of that process.
Super, that's reassuring, thank you. And effectively what we're doing here with this particular service is moving from a demand-driven service in the respect of, a demand-responsive service to one that is a scheduled service that still provides cover for the same geographic area, but doesn't actually call at people's doors to pick them up. We'll call it bus stops. Am I right in thinking that's what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So it covers the same area, but because of the nature of the New Forest, the rural nature of the New Forest, there's a concern from some of the parishes and some of the residents that they'll struggle to access the fixed route service. And that is something that we'll need to work with the bus company to make sure that the route meets as many of the needs as we can, and to make sure that the community transport services that also exist in those areas can pick those people up who simply can't travel from their door, but who can't get to the bus stop. They need to be travelling from their door. And there are previously New Forest Call and Go, we're now calling New Forest Connect, operates in those areas, so can take people to their destinations, but alongside the fixed route service, obviously, depending on what people want to use. And it's there's a lot of passion in the New Forest for this service, and it's not a decision that any one of us obviously want to take lightly to change it. But in order to meet our budgetary requirements, we are left with no option.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to reflect that this was the last of our responsive services, and it's something that hasn't happened elsewhere for quite some time. And in supporting the decision, what I would say is, I'd repeat what I said at the Select Committee this morning, but I think that there is very much a need for us to look to join up the bus services, the commercial bus services, with the community operators in a better way. We're looking at ways in which we can do that. This is a decision that we're making for a year. That buys us some space and some time to look at alternative options. But at the end of the day, a demand responsive service in the way that we have had in the New Forest is something that we have not been able to offer in the rest of Hampshire for quite some time. And consequently, I'm afraid we do need, because of the pressure on our budget, to move across to this new service. And I very much hope that we can work with the parishes and the community bus operators to fill the gap and enhance what we have there from here on in. So without the recommendations that we've got are in paragraphs 2 to 4 on pages 63 to 64, and they enact the proposals that were put forward, as Lisa helpfully said, by Councillor Heron back in November. I'm happy to approve those. Thank you. So my final item is item 5. That's on pages 71 to 80. It's the Local Transport Fund. Patrick.
Thanks, Councillor King. Again, this was looked at by the Select Committee today and a presentation given around this particular fund. And it's about support to bus operators where they've seen a reduction in patronage and how we can support what the routes that in essence wouldn't be commercially viable without this level of input from us. The money comes from DFT. I think what's helpful with this paper is it also sets out not just the process by which the money will go to them, but actually clear that we need to do an assurance piece of work as well, which is covered in the report, to ensure that money is spent wisely and properly, because it's fairly significant sums of money going to our these commercial entities. But that was all I was going to say on this paper. But again, we've got Lisa here for any detailed questions on it. Thank you.
Yep. So again, something that we touched upon this morning in a bit of detail. Tim or Sarah, would you like to add anything to that?
No, thank you for the opportunity. No, I think we had a good discussion on that this morning. Thank you.
We did, yeah. Russell, any comment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very conscious we need to get passenger numbers back up to where they were pre-COVID. And, I'm giving some thought to how I can encourage residents in my division to do that. And, I'm open to any other people have, but I'm sort of thinking about how I use my newsletter and my social media to just get more people out onto the buses, because I think that is really what we need to do. It's an important thing. It's a public service function. If people want to keep these buses, we've all got to use them. And as councillors, I think we can play our part in that. Because it's not just about money, it's also about people actually using them and making them viable.
Yep, absolutely. Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot just to mention the £2 and the £2.50 is a really good way of incentivising passengers back on. But there is obviously that pressure on the bus services where we have a lot of our older folk that use the free bus pass. And we need to make sure, that the companies are supported. We do need to have a service in a lot of areas, and in my division and Fareham as well. I mean, there are some shortage of bus services in the evenings, but I can understand decisions that are made because of financial pressures. So, but I do like the £2 and £2.50 incentive.
Super. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, in support of that as well. I think that is it's a good opportunity that we have that now, and we have it also for another year, the £2.50 incentive for another year, which we probably weren't expecting. So I think that is something we should take advantage of. I am a little concerned that new services, even though it's a replacement of existing, I'm told can't have that £2 cap. There's a service in Chandler's Ford that was lost last September, completely lost, and we've been trying to, or Lisa and her team have been trying to replace it for the last 10 months, and we've now got a replacement. But I'm told the £2 cap can't apply for that, and even though it's quite a short distance, it's going to cost more to go from Chandler's Ford to Eastleigh than it is to go to Chandler's Ford to Southampton or Winchester, for example, and that doesn't seem to make sense. So I think it would be really great if we could get a revised decision on that, just to encourage use and advertise it as such. I I think another good point was made this morning, I think by Lisa, that, you know, people like seeing full buses. And I think that's a really interesting point. If you see a bus going around empty, you're inclined not to use it because you think it doesn't work because no one uses it, like with restaurants. So I think that's also a very valid point. So if we can find ways of filling the bus, that could help us to get more usage and to make them more viable. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Appropriating Councillor Drew's analogy there of no one going into a restaurant without anybody in it. People don't get on buses that aren't the people not on. No, I think that's a really good point, Tim, as well. And it is a shame that we can't use it for we can't have the new, you know, the fare limit for new services. In a very interesting conversation, we meet with the bus operators on a regular basis and have a very constructive relationship with them. And in terms of, you know, that message of saying, if you don't use the buses, then you might lose the service. They were actually quite opposed to that being our mantra. And I think quite rightly what we should be saying is, if you use the buses, then that will enable us to pay for better services for you. So the more you use them, the better they get and the more that happens. And this is very much the kind of funding that we need to use to ensure that that happens, and that we do exactly as Sarah and Russell have said, have a service that connects everybody up and provides an alternative way of transport for everyone rather than sitting in your car in a traffic jam.
Can I just make one more point, Nick, very briefly? Just basically, I mean, basically, you're probably talking to the bus operators that didn't include the community transport people who are providing this service in Chandlersport. So they have an incentive to make that more expensive so that people use their services rather than the new one that we're providing. And it isn't really a new service. That's my point as well. It's a service that was lost due to those companies like Zelabus and others withdrawing. It's not a new service, it's an existing service, therefore it should have the cap, one would think. Thank you.
Lisa's going to explain, I think.
Just wants to come in on that. That's, you're absolutely right. New services aren't eligible for the £2 fare cap, and this is something that the Confederation of Passenger Transport, as the body for bus operators, is challenging with DfT. Because whilst I see your point, the very operators who were at the meeting also have new bus services that they can't charge the £2 for, and seeing that they're not being as attractive as they would like on these new services. They're not attracting as many people as they would like on the new services because they're having to pay the standard fare rather than the subsidised fare of £2. So I think that it's a national issue, and it's certainly something that bus operators are very keen is taken up with DfT nationally and are using their body to do so.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that explanation. Very helpful. Thank you.
We hosted the Passenger Transport Forum last week, actually, looking at Hampshire's bus services. So the national people, and you know, that's certainly something that they are taking away to advocate on our behalf as well. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 71, and I'm very happy to approve those. And that is the end of my part of the decision day. So Russell, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Nick. I'm Russell Oppenheimer. I'm the Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. And thanks for attending my part of the virtual decision day today. I would like to just remind everyone that this decision day continues to be webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. I have no public deputations either, so I will move to my first item, which is item 6, Hampshire County Farms Annual Report 2022 to 23. And Patrick, can I invite you to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. Yeah, very happy to. And it's always nice to bring reports like this to the decision days. I mean, what you've got in the report really is a summary of the progress on our county farms over the course of the year, and it sets out just how they're doing, how we're attracting new tenants into this space. I think a really strong point is how they're addressing some of the diversity issues, becoming quite diverse as a county farm network. I think also next to the report, you'll see the newsletter appended to that. Again, a really good publication, the annual newsletter that goes out, which illustrates all of these points. The last bit I would say on the report is we've seen some very good media coverage around our county farms nationally, both on Country Farm and other media outlets. So it is a good news story across the county council, and I hope what you see is encapsulated in the report. And just give some credit to Josie Palmer, who leads on a lot of this work, who's not here today, but certainly the report is written with Josie, who's driven lots of this work. But that was all I was planning to say, Councillor Oppenheimer.
Well, thank you, Patrick. And I'm going to say a few things, but before I do, I would just like to invite comments from any of the other councillors who are in attendance. If they would like to comment, please put your hand up. Okay, Sarah, Councillor Pankhurst, would you like to say anything about County Farms?
Yeah, just it's great to see younger people coming in to the new farms. And I think it's given that the food inflation is such an important factor in the day-to-day costs for our families, really would like to see more farms being used for farms rather than development. So it's encouraging to see this. So absolutely brilliant news. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Tim, would you like to comment?
No, thank you very much for the report. I have no further comments. Thank you.
And Nick, do you want to say anything at this point about the annual report on County Farms?
No, only only briefly to say there's a county farm in my division, and they do a great job there. And what is really lovely to see is that in the last few months, it's been taken over by a young female farmer who, and in providing the county farm, we were able to give her a helping leg up to get into the business and to do things. And so I'd underline that diversity issue that that you were talking about in terms of, Patrick was mentioning, in terms of how we are really being able to help people get into farming. And for a farming family myself, so I know both how tricky it is, but how rewarding it is as a life choice.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Jackie Branson, can I invite you to say whatever you would like to?
Yeah, just to say that this is something obviously we looked at one of the old select committees, and I would just also like to congratulate on such an excellent report, which I would like to see distributed as far as wide as we can, you know, because I think a lot of councillors don't realise exactly how much we do.
Completely agree, and I'm actually thinking that I'll send an email to all county councillors later today with the link so that everyone sees that. I'll work on that this afternoon. And I just want to say how pleased I am with the report. I'm very proud of our county farms and our tenants. I think what's particularly impressive about the diversity point is it's just been done in a very good way. It's very clear that the diversity that we've got in has been effective and enhanced our relationship with communities, with the wider agricultural sector. And it's quite inspiring to see young people coming in and bringing in new ideas and diversifying, but also producing great food. And yeah, I think we can all be proud of our county farms and the role they play in our communities and in producing, you know, the milk and the meat and the food that we all use every day and we all rely on. So I agree, we do want wide circulation. We do want people to know what we've been doing and to see the good stories and to feel proud, and then to go and visit these county farms, visit the farm shops and the farm markets, and celebrate Hampshire's wonderful farming community. So without any further ado, I'm going to move to the recommendation, which is in paragraph 2 on page 81. And I'm very pleased to approve that recommendation. Thanks a lot, Katie. So that brings us to my final item on property services decisions. And this last item is an exempt item. So I'm going to say thank you very much to those attending and observing today. As I read the formal exclusion, I'm saying thank you and goodbye to anyone watching online. So the exclusion of the press and public